not by the supply, but by the demand. Always, every disruption, every change in the economic model of a country, of an economy in general, is always led by the demand. So this is why, and it's understandable that today people who are in the energy business, utilities, oil and gas companies, are struggling with that concept because they are not going to decide. They're going to find it.
Emmanuel, I'm delighted to have you on the show. We've known each other for over 20 years, ever since you opened the door to my first international assignment when I was a junior leader at Schneider Electric in my home city of Barcelona. I've appreciated you for staying in touch for so long. In recent years, we've been talking more often as I evolved from the private equity buyout environment to entrepreneurship and venture capital. And on your side, you moved from Chief Strategy Officer of General Electric to the Chief Innovation Officer role. And now I'm very excited and keen to know more about your latest move to the growth investment firm, General Atlantic, in New York City, with their new subsidiary called Beyond Net Zero. So please explain us what Beyond Net Zero is and what made you become a founding member of this new project.
Hi, Albert, and nice to see you, and thank you very much for your kind words. And I value also our relationship over all those years. I think climate is probably a combination of the major risk and the major opportunity for the planet and for our economies. We just are at the onset of an industrial revolution. Or a technology revolution, call it as you want, very similar to the one we saw in IT 20 years ago, which led to what we know of technology today and IT and social media and cloud and AI and crypto and probably many other things to come. I think this is a disruption and a revolution of that magnitude. Some people even say it's more than this. It's really the size of an industrial revolution, like the two previous industrial revolutions or three previous industrial revolutions we have gone through. So there is a real change and impact for good on the economy, with creation of a lot of value and new jobs, but also societies where things will change, and then there will be also companies that will disappear and will be disrupted, but new ones that will be created. I think that in the long term, all the balance will be positive for the economy, for the creation of wealth and the welfare of societies, and on top of it, good for the planet. So at Schneider Electric, I was already doing this because in the last 3 years as a Chief Innovation Officer, I focused all my efforts in how to position Schneider Electric in the energy transition. Before that, when I was Chief Strategy and Chief Sustainability Officer, I relaunched and rekindled the sustainability strategy of the company, which made of Schneider Electric the most sustainable corporation in the world, as per the ranking of Corporate Knights earlier this year in Davos. So I've always been very engaged with sustainability and with that idea that you can do good for the planet and at the same time create wealth, create value for shareholders. Now, this project of Beyond Net Zero with Browne and the team of General Atlantic is the opportunity to go one step further in this. Look, there's a proliferation of initiatives coming from finance and from the world of capital markets and private equity and asset managers. And I've been observing this from the vantage point of Schneider Electric, from the vantage point of a 80 billion public company. and observing a bit how all those private equity and those funds were creating something new or trying to create something new. What I think is really different with this project of Beyond Net Zero is that it's not just the private equity that has been investing forever in everything else and just decided to do ESG because it looks like a good idea this day. It's really a project that has been built from the ground up. Mm-hmm. We've been at it for almost 6 months now, and Lord Browne and Lance Hugler have been at it for longer than this, with together with Bill Ford, the CEO of General Atlantic. And it's really, you get the best of both worlds. You get the discipline, the performance of General Atlantic as a growth equity investor, together with a team of specialists who know the space, who know how that industrial revolution will happen. And if you look at all those new projects that are popping up all around the finance community, there is none like this, where you have really a team of people who know what they are talking about, together with one of the most savvy investment team on the planet. So the combination of those two is what makes it unique, and this is why, for me, among all those projects, and that idea of confirming my vocation and my belief that you can really create wealth by and doing the best for the planet. This project is unique, and I think is going to be really the one that would create an impact for good, both on the returns and for good also for the planet.
Yeah, I think that we have shared this personal mantra of doing well by doing good. Let's talk about the urgency for climate change. What is your take on the 6th IPCC report? Some people took a "we are doomed" message from it, while others saw a more optimistic message that indicated that we still have time to avoid catastrophic outcome. What's your own take?
Well, I'm optimistic. I think that it's possible to curb or stop global warming, or to slow it down at least, and to limit it to 1.5 degrees. It's there. The technologies, the companies that are going to contribute to this are existing or are being created as we speak. We just have to make sure that they have enough space, enough capital, enough room to grow, especially because those companies are going to disrupt very regulated markets where governments and some very large interests are entrenched. Think about the whole supply chain or value chain of energy, would it be oil and gas or electricity? Those are very consolidated companies with very entrenched relationships and visibility, while some of these companies will know and understand how to adapt. Others will be in denial, like it happens each time in a disruption, until they disappear or get disrupted, but they will resist as much as they can. And as we are talking about things which are impacting the life of people, that those companies will, with that denial, probably try to slow down the transition when it comes to energy or water conservation or resource conservation in general.
So how are you organized to identify those opportunities? I understand that you have a thematic approach, and what do you bring to the table in those different themes that Net Zero covers? So
it's possible. 1.5 degrees is possible. The technologies and the companies are there. It's definitely, if we let those companies expand and not being slowed down by the incumbents, that will happen. The point, though, is that today, when you create one of those companies with the technologies that are going to change the planet for good and create wealth and create jobs, it's relatively easy to find capital when you're at the early stages of your company. There's a lot of venture capitalists who are doing ESG investing or energy transition and doing it fairly well. I mean, we all know the names: Breakthrough Energy Ventures, Energize Ventures, EIP, you name it. And they are everywhere in the world, mostly in the US and in Europe and a little bit in Israel, more and more in China, of course. Also, so early stage capital is there. Now, when it comes to growth equity, to late stage, you're talking about companies and technologies which are facing a very difficult environment. Back to my point on incumbents, which will play everything they can to drag their feet, slow down the energy transition, for instance, or the decarbonization of the economy. So when you're in the growth equity phase of your company, you start needing large amounts of money to finance your growth and go towards an IPO, but still you're offering the world something which is different and a bit counterintuitive. This is where you need to talk to specialists, and specialists who can really help you grow, finance you with the magnitude and the size you need. So we're talking about the amounts of investments that VCs are not able to do because that's way beyond their mandate. But you still need to finance the company and keep it private for another 2 or 3 years. And that part in climate tech or in climate investing, that part is not covered today. And the proof of that is that last year we saw many companies in decarbonization themes like electrification of vehicles, solar, resource conservation, and so on and so forth. Companies who just needed investments or checks of 50, 100, 200 millions to continue finance their growth. So that's way too big for most VCs. But most private equity would not exactly understand what they were doing because it's still uncertain. Think about investing in an EV charging infrastructure business. It's still not there. The market is still not there. So what were those companies doing? Well, they were ending up merging with SPACs. SPACs who were hungry to deploy capital, coming with pots of money which were much larger and much bigger than what they were needing. But the problem is that they were literally taking public companies which were not ready for prime time, not ready to be public because they were, well, maybe they had some revenue, but they were not yet profitable. And that's not a good story to tell the markets. And definitely, if they come with an approach which is counterintuitive, it's very difficult for retail investors to understand it. So my point here is that in climate investing, in impact investing, this is the time now to bring to the market and to the entrepreneurs in that growth equity stage a vehicle and a tool they can use, and that is not a SPAC. That is not going to rush them to public markets and help them grow the company until it's really ready to go public.
I think that's very interesting, and I understand that your venture is planning to deploy around $4 billion of capital on a group of this type of companies. I would like, and I think that you have covered why those companies should really see Beyond Net Zero as the right partner rather than maybe going to a SPAC, even despite that we have this window of opportunity right now. So what's the typical round size that you'd participate in, and what are the type of milestones you would expect to see in order to attract the interest of Beyond Net Zero?
So it's about investing in companies dedicated to energy efficiency, decentralization, decarbonization, digitization of energy supply, plant-based solutions for plastics, to eliminate NOx and emissions from agriculture, water conservation, and so on and so forth. No asset heavy, so this is definitely not an infrastructure fund, right? So this is a venture that is helping entrepreneurs growing their company when they go at the growth equity stage. So we're talking about growth here. So there's a lot of software, there's a lot of unique technologies. You would typically look at companies that don't have any technology risk anymore, that are really emerging as one of the 2, 3, 4 winners in their category, creating themselves a category with proven commercial revenues between $25 and $50 million minimum. Maybe not yet profitable, but breaking even in the next 2 to 3 years. This is what we will be looking at. And so with those parameters, of course, it's different. If you look at a pure software company that will enable this decentralized grid, or if you look at a company that is doing plant-based plastics or regenerative agriculture, the multiples and the parameters of investments are very different. So it's very difficult to put a strict set of numbers. But we're talking about companies which are reaching $500 million of valuation, give or take, and above, between 500 and millions and $1 billion of valuation. So this is really growth equity territory. After all, it's about deploying in climate technologies the playbook of General Atlantic. What General Atlantic did with Alibaba and Financial, Tory Burch, Uber, Airbnb, and so on and so forth, we are going to do it with climate technology companies when they reach that growth equity stage. So it's not venture. There's no technology risk. The companies are selling. They have really already large and important commercial operations. And it's really about helping the entrepreneurs and grow and prepare them. We have a whole team that is preparing the companies for IPOs and preparing them in that growth phase in the last 2-3 years before an IPO or whatever type of exit they want to do. Always in a minority position. So it's about influence, not control, because we really want the entrepreneurs to be in charge of their destiny. It's their business, and we're here to help accelerate them and finance their growth.
So what I get is that you're in search of the green tech FAANGs like Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Google, but for clean tech. And this reminds me that Kara Swisher from the New York Times claimed with 100% certainty, and I quote, the world's first trillionaire will be a green tech entrepreneur. That's trillionaire with a T. So I'm very much excited about all the wealth that this is going to be generating by tackling a critical problem in our world. Let me ask you, I mean, your venture is quite new. Have you already invested in any company in your in the last few months?
Yeah, the answer is yes. But before going there, I think I agree with Kara Swisher. The first trillionaire will be a clean tech, a green tech investor. Maybe it's Elon Musk, because after all, what Tesla does is it's an energy company that very smartly chose to start with cars, but don't look at Tesla as a car company. It's an energy company that will electrify cars and power your buildings and your homes. But definitely, just like in the tech revolution of 20 years ago, you don't have only one Facebook and that's it. You have Facebook and Google and Apple and Microsoft and so on and so forth. You have at least 5 or 6 companies that will be soon at $1 trillion or more of market capitalization. So for now, there is Tesla. If the same pattern reproduces, and happens here, well, there's another 4 coming, and they will come from different angles. So this is what we want to help discover and push the companies which are really going to be the leaders in decarbonization technology. And again, they exist, they are there. We are working already actively on 6 investments when we have a pipeline of more than 500 opportunities. But we're already working on 6 investments, very, very active conversations. And
so in order to better understand your investment scope, are you seeking to invest only in technologies that bring systemic innovation? I'd even call those with a dose of radical innovation. Or would you consider investments that bring incremental innovation alone? For example, if a company would come with new techniques to do fracking with less environmental damage, would you invest on those companies?
This is a very good question, Albert, because it's tempting to look at companies which are providing a transition solution, right? Because many people, and some people are arguing, I mean, Vaclav Smil, for instance, is saying that, no, the energy transition will take decades to happen, like the others have taken decades. Well, I'm not sure I agree with that point. I don't think the transition from wood to coal and the transition from coal to oil really took decades. It was fairly fast. The last one from coal to oil was fairly fast. And this one, because it's mostly fueled by 2 technologies, batteries, because batteries enable the decentralization of the grid, they enable electric vehicles and many applications. And the other one is AI, artificial intelligence, because they enable a lot of applications in the conservation of resources, from precision agriculture to the decentralization of a grid and many other things, and the creation of molecules that you would not think about before. Those 2 technologies, if you think about it, they are evolving at an exponential pace. You look at the cost of batteries, how it's decreasing, and of course AI is almost submitted to, call it law of more or something. So that one is not going to take decades in the making. It's a very good question. So if it's not going to take decades in the making, why would we need transition fuels or transition solutions? Now, there are really a few problems which are difficult to solve. So, case in point, I mean, 5 years ago, everybody was saying that gas will be the transition fuel from oil to renewables. Renewables will take a few years to come of age and be cheap, and gas is gone. Gas is not a transition fuel. It's behind. That's it, gone. Nobody would have thought that 5 years ago. Renewables and solar is much better than, much more flexible, much more predictable.
I'm very curious about how fast technology is evolving on green tech. Many people do the analogy with the law of Moore for semiconductors, the one based in the observation that the number in a dense integrated circuit doubles every 2 years. So it's very interesting to see how these technologies are as well becoming cheaper, more affordable, easier to scale. What technologies in clean tech do you see as more promising?
There's a lot of movement these days, a lot of buzz around batteries, definitely, because batteries you have a lot of innovations. You have the emergence of the electrical vehicle markets, right? With markets like the European and the Chinese market for EVs, which start to be sizable. 15% of new cars in countries like Germany, the Netherlands, France, Belgium are electric today. That's more electric vehicles sold in Europe than diesel. And even the European market is even larger than the Chinese market, which was really the only market for EVs. And the US is coming very, very fast behind, probably 1 year behind Europe that exponential adoption of EVs combined with the economies of scales you have that this is bringing to batteries, combined with new technologies around sodium ion, new formulas around, that is really creating a sort of almost law of Moore in batteries. So this is one. Another one is the application of AI to the grid. If you 20 years ago, if you wanted to build a grid, you would basically size it for the peak demand. Because there was no AI, there was no way to manage dynamically the grid or fast enough to keep the lights on. So today, because in a grid, in an electricity system, you need to, in real time, to adequate demand to supply. Otherwise, you have a blackout. So the only way to do that was to have those peaker plant and to fire a new power plant each time you were reaching a peak and those power plant, the only way to get that flexibility was with fossil fuel power plants, with oil or gas plants. Now, if you want to adequate demand to offer, well, you can reduce the demand, simply ask people who have connected thermostats or connected boilers or EV chargers to consume energy at another time of the day, or reward them if they accept to cool their house a little bit less or heat it a little bit less. So you can reduce demand, or you can flex capacity because you have batteries and you can play with renewables. So if you have a real software where in a world where every house, every car, every warehouse, every factory potentially becomes an energy asset, and you have enough software to keep the lights on and balance demand and supply, here again, you have something that can grow at an exponential pace.
So yes, we're getting more options and better options and cheaper options, but at the end of the day, such a transformation will not just be driven by supply. And you and I have been discussed that massive adoption of clean tech solutions will be led by the consumer. But should regulation play a role in the meantime?
So first, it will be led by consumers and businesses, by not by the supply, but by the demand. Always, every disruption, every change in the economic model of a country, of an economy in general, is always led by the demand. So this is why, and it's understandable that today people who are in the energy business, utilities, oil and gas companies, are struggling with that concept because they are not going to decide. They're going to find it in front of them. People will decide to have EVs, and those EVs will power their house and will make them feel better because they are not contaminating, not polluting the planet anymore. And those EVs will be cheaper than the combustion engine cars and will be much more fun to drive and will have a better autonomy. So why would you buy a gasoline car? But it is not an oil and gas company who will decide this. It will be at a combination of the battery technologies and the car OEMs who will make this happen, and the consumer choice. So if you're an oil and gas company, well, you will find it in front of you. That cars are not going to run on gas anymore very soon, or some very small proportion of cars will run on gasoline. So definitely it's not going to be supply driven. It's going to be driven by demand, all those revolutions. And same in food and water consumption and plant-based plastics and all this. Now, what governments are understanding, especially after the COVID crisis, they're understanding this is an opportunity to create jobs in their economies. So that protecting the established order and those very large companies, which were national champions and supplying a lot of jobs, those jobs will inevitably disappear because those companies' business models are threatened. Governments start understanding that it's better for their societies and their people to help and incentivize this transition to a greener and less carbon-intensive economy. So you see that everywhere, in China, in the US, in Europe. I'm a bit more skeptical about, and this is where we all have to help about some emerging economies. And global warming doesn't know about borders, right?
Yeah.
If in rich countries where we make everything happen and then we are below 1.5 degrees, but Africa, South America, Southeast Asia doesn't get there. Well, as a planet, we haven't gotten there. So this is also something we have to take care of. So this is, I think, rich economies, governments in rich economies have mostly done or have understood what they need to understand. In emerging economies, in new economies, well, they have a lot of problems to solve, especially in this COVID crisis, and they will need help and support from the others to reach this, because they cannot be left behind. Definitely not.
So, I mean, what I get from this conversation is that certain societal change, adopting a new set of paradigms, is key to the energy transition and transformation of the world we build. And that's brilliant. I mean, it's very inspiring, the journey that you are taking with General Atlantic and Beyond Net Zero. Wish you plenty of success. Thank you, Emmanuel.
Thank you very much, Albert. Good to see you, and all the best to you too, and more to come. And again, we are already very active on a few cases and ideas, and well, you will hear about them very, very soon, I guess.
I look forward for that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Albert. Bye.